All right, so in these videos, we are going to have our main kind of lecture content for Introduction to Sociology. I am your professor, Oliver Cowart, and starting off, this is going to be how the main kind of lecture part is going to happen, and I encourage you to take notes during these short videos. We're going to break them up into smaller chunks. In these first week videos, we're just going to be introducing you to the course. In this first video, we're going to be looking at what is sociology a little bit, setting the tone for the course, and in the next quick video, we're going to look at the online learning model we're going. It's actually a remote instruction model, not online learning, and how best to succeed in this course. So what is sociology? One thing we can do is break down the word. The first part, socio or soc, and ology, or we need to think about what are the root words here. The first part stands for society. Now, typically when we think of society or the social, we might think of gathering, interacting, talking to others, chatting with them on our phone, but while we do study that, it actually goes far beyond that. Sociology is a study of all those things that are greater than us in our everyday individual lives. Things we run into and interact with. Most of you may be familiar with psychology, that looks at the science of your psyche or your mind. Sociology looks at all those things outside of our mind that impact human behavior and human life. Fundamentally, it's about human societies. So as we'll see, this can mean a lot of different things. It means things like race and gender, things like education and schooling systems. These are institutions that exist outside of us and shape our behavior. We'll look at culture and power and inequality. All of these things are very current. And it's an interesting time we live in right now because a lot of the social rules and norms of our everyday lives are changing very rapidly. We're not often aware of society, much like we're not often aware of the air we breathe. Unless it becomes polluted or starts to change around us and the smell changes. In the same way, society is often invisible to us until it starts to change in some way. Right now, we have new norms and rules around things like masks and distancing. We have to learn new behaviors. We are in a time of a lot of racial upheaval, and we're learning new ways in which, well, the police are very militarized. Or some people are learning that, and some people have known it for a long time. So we live in an interesting time in which society and our world around us is much more visible to us than it might normally have been. And so this is going to make it a really interesting course this semester because everything we're learning is applicable to what we're doing right now. Now, if you look at the second part of this word, the ology part, that simply refers to the Greek word logos, which means knowledge. So sociology is the discipline that gets knowledge about society. It is a science of society. Right? And it is a science. We have scientific methods that we'll learn in week 3. And it's very rigorous. And it takes a long time to become a sociologist. So unlike history or economics or psychology, we look at pretty much everything in human life. We look at the relationship between personal identity, what goes on in your psyche, what psychologists study, and maybe your economic class, how wealthy you are. For example, something like masks. We're all required to make, well, we should all be wearing masks these days. But if we look at something like political affiliation, we see that people who are to the left or more democratic are much more likely to wear masks, even though the science of masks is pretty clear. If everybody wore masks, we could actually get rid of this pandemic pretty darn quickly. Now, part of this is because we have a lot of different messaging. So we'll look at media and how media influences who and how we are as a society. Certain groups use certain channels like Fox News, for example, which put out certain ideas that are incorrect. but because the media puts them out there, people believe them. So on the one hand, the choice to wear a mask is, yes, a personal choice. But on the other hand, what we know and believe about them, our attitude towards them, what the mask represents, it depends on our culture, on our friends, on a lot of other things that go way beyond the individual. We might notice, for example, that women tend to wear masks more frequently than men as well. Again, here we have ideas around masculinity, about bravery, about trying to protect yourself that are unique, one, to American society, and two, to men in American society. So part of what we're going to be looking at in this first week in one of your first Flipgrid assignments, which we'll cover in our first meeting, is thinking about the connection between these personal issues and choices and some of these bigger things outside of us that shape those choices. We'll be developing our sociological imagination. All right, we'll talk about that more in class. In the next video, we'll think about how are we going to make this online stuff work this semester.